Well, hi.
Greetings.
This is Jeff and Foxy. Final boss.
Final Fox.
Final Fox. We're going to drink our soda stream water, and she's going to drink booze. I'll let you guys guess
soda?
who's classier.
Soda. It's
Just
classy.
kidding. I'm kidding. Or maybe I should have said who's going to live longer.
Me, who
Soda
would be
water.
more relaxed, like having a cigar.
That's true. Cigars actually do increase life expectancy to a degree.
It's a little nightcap, just... Anyways.
Anyways.
That's about my alcoholism.
This is a essay called What I Learned Trying to Write About the Abortion Debate. It's a creative nonfiction essay, and no matter what our opinions are, for those who are watching, we're going to come at it from a craft perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is the idea being conveyed, and how could it be conveyed better?
Let's make this a debate-free zone, people.
Yeah, because, still is interesting to see how one makes a point, especially in a touchy subject. So it should be fun. The air carried the signature funk of the San Francisco Soma District, a potpourri of urine, stale alcohol bottles, and ripening food scraps. My essay on San Francisco has very similar descriptions, Chrissy's, or my short story. So I'm just kidding now. You can definitely reuse descriptions. I was giving you a hard time.
No, you can't.
You can't reuse descriptions. You gotta find another description of San Francisco. I'm just kidding. The air carried a signature funk of San Francisco, potpourri of urine, stale alcohol bottles, and ripening food scraps. Passed from a huddle against the outer wall of a Walgreens, heard muffled sobs, and kept walking.
Why?
Eternal tug. Yeah, I guess. I would give like a 2.
Yeah, just a brief.
Keep marching and catch the bar. Whatever it is. I guess that would be like this. Anyways, at the end of the block, I felt an internal tug. That is a little vague. Anything with a felt is something you can use that verb, felt, but it's always worth checking in a revision. Whenever you see felt come up, felt is always a watchword word in revisions. Could this be like, like an internal, what does an internal tug feel like to someone? It's like, also internal tug is a little vague. For example, it could be like,
Yeah.
I would just describe your action, I stopped, took a breath and turned around. Because we don't need to have the interior emotional journey necessarily.
It might even be as simple as suddenly, when you first pass the woman, you might not really think about it, and it might be as simple as actually experiencing a moment of being like, oh, that woman was upset and I just walked right by her. And that could be the tug. Just kind of describing what exactly made you stop and turn around. Because that tug was probably you being like suddenly your brain clicking and being like, that lady was crying. I didn't even notice because I was not thinking about it. So maybe that's a better way.
One thing that in fiction more, but one of the things that would be kind of a common thing is whenever there's an internal moment, a change happening, sometimes the more you can be in the scene instead of the head, the more, and it's very rarely, because sometimes you do want interiority and you do want to be in the thoughts, but I think in a moment like this, just having, at the end of the block, I stopped. I looked back at her and turned around. I feel like, that will tell me that there's an internal tug, that will show me that all that stuff has happened, and I can kind of experience, stopped. looked I surprised myself by turning around. Most I'd ever done for the homeless in the past. You know that?
Do you have chat on?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Usually a lot of people if people are doing Twitch correctly, they'll usually let their stream sit on for like 10 minutes so people who get the notification can come on. But whatever. We'll be here for a while. I want Chrissy to get her notes. Yeah, they always have like starting soon for like 10, 15 minutes. I surprised myself by turning around. The most I've ever done for the homeless in the past. I want us to be a little bit more tactile. That's again, you're in this super distant, super didactic, this narrative voice. I wanted to hear it in your voice a little bit, like, something like, sure, I'd given the homeless dollars, a couple of, in the past, and one night I even gave
Got some nutmeg.
a nice old lady some, my takeout. But I want to kind of hear the experience in your voice. Every time you're like, the most I'd ever done for the homeless in the past was drop a small bit. That's a very zoomed out register of language. It's not a casual tone. There's a few things that are making this feel very zoomed out in terms of its narrative distance. The narrative, and this is really important and I'm going to hammer on this more in a personal essay than I would in prose, is very pulled back. Here's why. One, high register of language. No direct address to the reader. No casual word choice. And also the structure, like a preposition slows the sentence. Preposition, like left branching. Slows the sentence. Taking us out of the moment. Also, tone is more distanced. So yeah, these are things to think about, and I would really look across a lot of your sentences for those symptoms, because I do think that having, and especially a personal essay, like we're really zoomed in to because you're zooming us into a scene. Like if it was something where you were like kind of going over your observations or whatever, yeah, I would probably give you a different note. But we're in a scene here. We're in a moment by moment transaction. And what's happening is we're in the scene. We're with you in the Soma district. You're doing a great job of evoking senses. We're getting smell. We're getting food scraps, this kind of rotten environment. And then, boom, we pull back out to this very abstract narrator who's kind of like summarizing things for us. Oh, yeah, and it's also in a tone of summary. What would be another thing? Yeah. It's also summarizing a lot of data into a short, something narrators. So you pull us back out, and then it's a little harder for us to get back into like the scene.
It also seems like you're changing your tense around, or just kind of the way you're approaching it. The story, it starts off very, like Jeff was saying, like very much in it, and I'm like a sentence ahead, and it kind of, like he said, it pulls back to it. But that day, I walked back to the woman, knelt down. 10 minutes later, she told me her story. So it's kind of like now we're way in the future looking back at it instead of like in it with you.
Yeah, like an example revision would be your thoughts. Maybe that's where we get those interior thoughts where you're like, what was I doing? I don't talk to strangers, much less strangers who are crying and blah 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 blah. I, I just should give her $1 and leave, like I always do. Those types of interior thoughts will keep you in the immediate moment. Up to you, though. It is a style choice. I mean, there are obviously some positives you could get by doing something like that with the narrative distance, but I'm not seeing it could the goal, like when you would pull back and have a distant narrator like that, would be to distance from the character, to say, "Oh, look at that character." Me, the narrator, and the reader are gonna kind of like very similar to what happens in a lot of Good Omens, like Terry Pratchett's stuff, like where the narrator is kind of poking fun at or using his own narrative voice to ironically comment on the action. You can use a pulled back narrator to do very rapid summary of not very let's say something uninteresting is happening. You could do a summary to like quickly blast through it, and that kind of is a pullback narrator. But I don't really know, or if it's like sharing some really abstract philosophical thoughts that you really want to get across. But I don't know if it's really driving that much advantage right now, as it is. The most I'd ever done for the homeless, okay, was a little less, but the day I walked back to the woman and knelt down and put a hesitant hand on her shoulder. When I given her directions to close the screen station, Tony was to help her get home. I wavered. Should I give her more? I'd have just taken him in by an inventive story. She interrupted my hesitation by pulling me into a hug. When she drew back, she looked in my eyes and breathed out a hushed thank you and departed. My heart thumped with unexpected warmth.
But yeah, to me it seems like a different tense when you say 10 minutes later she told me her story instead of it feels like you're looking back at it instead of us living through it.
Yeah, the retrospective, I don't know.
Kind of go in and out of, because then you kind of go back and then you're back in the moment. She interrupted my hesitation. She drew back. She looked me in the eyes.
Yeah, I think you might be like zooming out because you're afraid it's going to get too long or going to spend too much time in this moment. But I don't think that's going to be an issue for you. I think, I put a hesitant hand on her shoulder. She looked me in the eyes and told me her story. It was blah, 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 maybe just like a quick, I don't know, whatever.
Tears in my eyes, I, gave her directions to the closest Greyhound station and fumbled for whatever I had in my wallet. It was only $20,
yeah.
But it was, all I felt comfortable giving in the moment. But then I wavered. Should I have given her more, or had I just been taken in? And then we're in the story the whole time.
Yeah, again, so but this is another example of a pullback made. The fact that you are summarizing me what happens. I wavered. Mm-hmm. Should I have given her more, or should I have just taken her in? A way to not have that be. So this is like another example of a pulled back narrator. Remember, you can have questions that are in interiority, not just, I wavered, here was the question I had. You could be like, wait, did I just get taken in? Was I just taken in? Was this all some made up story? That's a bad example, and you can probably phrase it better, but
man, I only have $20. Is that enough? Should I even be giving this to her in the first place? Or I don't know.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So yeah, I think when you're in a scene, moving in and out of it without really good cause is going to be it's going to make your read feel more like, oh, we're here, we're back here. Oh no, we're not. So it's harder for the reader to get. So the reader wants to settle into an experience. Generally, certain books will set up that they're not going to do that. I've been reading Good Omens, and I could literally turn to any page almost, and it will have this kind of narrator that's pulled back, commenting on the scene, kind of this running commentary. Let me see. Oh yeah, so this is about a call center in this book. And this is the line. There were 6 women and 4 men, and each of them had a telephone and a thick wad of computer printout covered with names and telephone numbers. By each of the numbers was a pen notation. This is scene description. Was a pen notation saying whether the person was dialed in, was in or out, whether the number was currently connected, and most importantly, narrator coming in. That's a narrator's voice. That's why it's good to like highlight when you read prose or when you read other personal essays. Where's the narrator talking? Highlight where's the dialogue, where's the scene description, where's the action, where's all those different pieces in different colors, and you'll see how they're constructing and staying usually pretty consistent, you know. And most importantly, whether or not anybody who answered the phone was avid for cavity wall insulation to enter their lives. Most of them weren't. So again, narrator, like, and he's using summary to throw in ironic, and that's a voice narrator, and that's sarcastic. Usually the best. Yeah, what did I say?
Oh no, I was just laughing at
yeah.
Sarcastic, notations.
Yeah, so 10 people sat there hour after hour, cajoling, pleading, promising through plastic smiles. Between calls, they made notations, sipped coffee, and marveled at the rain flooding down the windows. They were staying at their posts like the band of the Titanic. If you couldn't sell double glazing in weather like this, you couldn't sell it at all. Lisa Morrow was saying, now, if you'll only let me finish, sir, and yes, I understand that, sir, but if you'll only, so there's dialogue coming in, but the narrator is still the person that's running the show. He's only using these other devices like dialogue and action and scene to back up this thing the narrator is trying to drive. So that's like a different style, right? You're going into a full scene style where the narrator starts and he establishes it from page one like this, but you start from a very in the scene point of view. So food for thought. Anyways, I just wanted to read that line because it's hilarious.
Most of them weren't.
Cavity, really avid for cavity wall insulations. Yeah, okay. But British literature is a good place to go for great narrators.
Or fairy tales.
And I would agree. Pink Fox is absolutely right. She interrupted my hesitation by pulling me into a hug. When she drew back, she looked me in the eyes and breathed out a hushed "thank you" and departed. My heart thumped with an unexpected warmth. I think we need to end there. I walked on, and within hours, the encounter was buried under meetings and unanswered emails. But it stuck unprocessed in the back of my mind.
Unprocessed feels like a summary as well.
Yeah. Do I need this? I think you can just be like, I feel like there's a more elegant, this is still like not, I feel like we're still in so much narrative summary. And I think because I know you, from what I've understood of your goals, you want to have this like kind of snappy connection with the reader. You want them to feel what you're trying to say. And it's hard to feel when it feels very didactic, very educational. And that's what a distant narrator sometimes brings into the tone, unless they are a very ironic narrator with their own voice, like Terry Pratchett. Afternoon, I got to the office. I had 2 meetings, 2 back-to-back meetings, a happy hour with colleagues, 2 back-to-back meetings, happy hour, and happy hour blue encounter out of my mind.
It's very much like the Stanley parable.
What do you mean? Yes, and Stanley, yeah.
When Stanley walked on, and within hours the encounter was buried under meetings and unanswered emails, but it stuck unprocessed in the back of his mind.
Yeah, you should play the Stanley parable. That would be a game that I think Chrissy would like.
Yeah.
Say philosophical statement more than a game.
Yeah, it's really just meandering and thinking about the concept of choice.
And why video games don't give it to you. Yeah. Being on the rails. Define pullback narrator for me. Yeah, a pullback narrator is... I just popped in. Yeah, great question. Also, E3 in 8 hours. I know, get excited. All the new news. A pullback narrator is usually a narrator who is summarizing. It is somebody who is not directly involved in the action of the scene. So like a scene is going on, and there is usually an emotion in the scene. A pullback narrator won't be feeling that emotion. A pullback narrator will be summarizing that emotion using language that doesn't really have that emotion in there, and taking large swaths of action and compressing it, and even thought, and saying, hey, this is an example. I wavered. Should I have given her more? And so that's the speaker of this story looking back in a very calm and collected redactor. It's like Tolkien. He's gone, and that's kind of how he portrays himself in Lord of the Rings. Is this this narrator who's come in and kind of sorted everything out, and he has this very well structured thing for you. It has some advantages, and we were kind of talking about those earlier, where yes, it can help get complicated concepts to the reader very quickly. You can have more abstract language and more abstract discussion. So a pullback narrator can usually bring in some philosophy and bring in some of their actual thoughts. And it can also put some distance between the character and the speaker, the narrator, which can make some really cool ironic things that we talked a little bit about that happens in Terry Pratchett's work. So there's some advantages to it, but I think what we're kind of talking about in this case, in this personal essay, at least in the beginning, I don't know if it's 100% necessary. Probably later on, it seems like it might be more, but we'll see.
All right.
Years later, the memory resurfaced in unexpected context in the wake of New York, New York and Alabama abortion laws. I grappled at the.
Yeah, I think this is typo.
What, did I spell something wrong?
No. In the wake of the New York and Alabama abortion laws, and I grappled with the debate.
Yeah, it's a good call. I think that should be. Bloop. The debate around me. What kind of debate? With heated.
Oh.
I don't know. Maybe you don't need the noun. Years later, the memory resurfaced.
And how does that?
I wonder. The cause and effect feels inverted.
That doesn't feel right.
Yeah, I feel like the cause is the wake of the New York abortion laws. Years later.
How does that remind you of the? I don't know.
I would try. Sorry, Chrissy's like, why are you rewriting this entire thing? Years later, the New York and Alabama along with them came,
The endless debates.
roaring. Yeah, whatever. Debates. Here's I shouldn't probably be writing this. Yeah.
Whatever you want to write, something else.
The roaring debates came, in their heels, and to my surprise, that memory resurfaced. Memory of the afternoon in Soma. Whatever.
Or whatever you want.
Yeah. It's a bad example, but whatever. I'd never heard that term before. Yeah, it's a helpful device. It can be a really helpful device. It's just one of those ones you want to make sure you have a very good reason to use it. For much of my life, I didn't give the issue of abortion much thought. When I did think about it, the picture of women who weren't ready to be mothers, swift removal of intrusive cells. But over the years, my perspective shifted. I made 26 converted to Catholicism, adopted the belief that all humans are equal until from conception till death, and on the doctrine. When pregnancy, I was pierced by the humanity of a tiny shape and took out a heartbeat and made a regal sound. My baby's distinctness is a unique person, separate from my body, with each progressively stronger kick, twist, and hiccup. I think that needs to be broken up. It's a big chunk of text. How would I break that up? I think there's like a lot of trimming I think they can do. There's a lot of these initial. I'm noticing a lot of left branching sentences, which you want to be very cautious. So if you go to Twitch when you watch this replay, um, and you go to this time in the chat, you'll be able to click on this link here. Maybe I'll just post it in your. I'll just make it simple.
Yeah, she's asleep right now.
No, but like when you watch the replay, it'll replay the chat.
Oh yeah,
it's kind of fancy. So left branching sentences, they come at a risk. I'm seeing a lot of left branching sentences. Read about their pros and cons here. I don't have to do the work. Okay, I'm just kidding. Now, I'll explain a little bit. Left branching will slow the read down. They can build suspense because you don't know what is going to be the base clause of the sentence. So they can build sentence level suspense. So if you like, running desperately, looking over my shoulder, breath coming in desperate gasps, and then, it's left branching. Like those are all like the what is it? So but when there isn't that when there isn't something that it feels like it's building towards, they can slow down the sentence. So rather than building up suspense, because suspense is the slowing of something where there's already tension in place, and if there's not really strong tension in place, it's going to not be as effective. For much of my life, I didn't give the issue of abortion much thought. So I just say, I don't know. I hadn't thought much about this. When I was young, I don't know, it's tough. I feel like this just needs to be more casual. This is so formal. And it's like, and I think your formal, but over the years, another left branching, why not just my perspective shifted? Then,
Or you could even just switch it and just be like, my perspective shifted over the years.
Yeah.
Because then it wouldn't have that left branching, right?
Yeah. Yeah. My perspective shifted over the years. Yeah. And that would at least
just switch it around. Like, I didn't give the issue of abortion much thought for the early years of my life.
Yeah. And it would just switch it up. Because, like, there's like two problems, kind of what Danielle is saying, right? Is like the one problem is that without kind of a build in that left branching clause, your sentence will feel like it's dragging on whenever you use the left branching and there's not a building aspect of it. The other downside is that because that same left branching device is being used and there's no right branching, there's no mid branching, there's no other branchings, it's going to start feeling monotonous. And it's also going to contribute to this very kind of like dispassionate narrator that we're starting to kind of feel a little bit. So kind of what Danielle says is like, hey, even if you don't even change the words, if you just make a left branching, a right branching, one out of every other time.
Speeding up and slowing down and like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and it'll kind of like, keep us guessing. And it sounds really dumb and very minutiae sentence level, but it does. I thought the same thing when I was doing this in prose, and I was like, the story should carry it. The story is first. Like, who cares about the prose level and blah? And I was wrong, at least especially for fiction. I mean, nonfiction is a little bit different. The idea does matter a lot more, and the premise you're trying to communicate and the way you communicate. But man, I do think that would be something to think about. All right. So I think this needs to get broken up big time. My mid-20s. Yeah, I think you could break it here. You could even make this a separate, like, and give us some of the emotion, neat, easy, problem solve, whatever those bad, dumb, dumb ideas. But I want some of the emotion about how, not just what you thought about it, I want to know how you felt about it. Because, like, you can say, oh, I thought it was a swift removal of intrusive cells. Like, what does that mean? That means the emotion is, oh, it's like taking out the trash. Like, problem solved. Like, oh, I got a thing on my arm. I just, I do have a thing on my arm. I should go to the dermatologist and just get it taken out. Problem solved. So I want to see that type of, I want to see the emotion of that a little bit more. You have swift. That's a really great chosen. That's a really well chosen verb because that that gives the sense of ease, but I think I need a little bit more. I don't need to know just what you think about it. You know. Simple. You know. Just a quick, you know, whatever. I'm not going to make an example because it'll be dumb, but because everyone will be like, why is this guy even saying anything?
You're a white male. You can't talk about this.
Actually, I identify as female, so thank you very much for trying to impose gender on me. Wow. Geez. A lot of work to do in this household. Wow. I'm like really insulted.
You should be. You love being offended.
It's the best. Being offended's great. I could make a career out of this.
If you were a woman, you would actually.
I would be great at being a woke AF. If I was, I would be fantastic. Oh man, because then I would identify as a guy. Just to be contrary.
You? Contrary?
Yeah. By my mid-20s, I converted to Catholicism and adopted the belief that all humans are equal from conception until death. Beyond the doctrine, I was convinced by stories. And
it's also kind of left-leaning.
Yeah, baby born in the size, mother saw. Oh God, what I've done. But we're getting the ladies' emotions, and the ladies' emotions again. Like this is a very, you know, and this is why I think the problem is still the narrator in this story, because this is a very dark and terrifying, you know, like that's a very powerful emotion for this character. But the narrator, you, because this is really, really about you. It's not about this mother. It's not about the 8-week-old. You know, it's not about anything but you as a personal essay. And the person whose emotions I am still missing is yours. They're very pulled back. They're very masked. I'm getting what you think. I'm not getting what you feel. Mm-hmm. I need to know, like,
it's like you're telling us the story, but you're.
What did this fact mean to you?
It's like you're telling us the story, but not telling us how you react to the story.
Yeah, I am like, you know.
Like maybe you would. I mean, some people would probably hear that story and be like, "Well, that's just abortion. That's what it is."
Yeah.
And other people would be like, "Oh my gosh, that's horrific."
Yeah, where are you all? Yeah, like yeah.
So the story itself doesn't convince people necessarily. Some people would be like, "Well, yeah. I mean, that's just the nature of it."
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, because like Danielle said, it's sort of like being concrete in your description.
You were convinced by this story, and then you just tell us the story, but it might not be convincing in and of itself. So it's more like you just need to tell us how you felt about the story, and we're gonna go along with that journey on you.
And the most, especially if this is a argumentative essay or it has some of those aspects of it where you're trying to say, hey, this is what I think. The best argument is making me feel the way you felt, not logic. I mean, we are emotional creatures. And, you know, so many of us come to, like myself included, a lot of my thought probably has a decent amount, is not as reasonable as I like to think it is. There's a lot of emotion and the way I feel about things. And then my logic can come in the end and be like, oh, this is why I think that, not just because I want to, you know. But that's the thing. Like the thing that makes this your story is your feeling, because that is the mother's story in some senses. Like, it's not your story. You're describing a story, but again, like Danielle said, it's sort of like being concrete. Like when I say, imagine a dog, you could imagine a little schnauzer, or you could imagine a huge Bernese mountain dog that's like yoked and fat and has a big, you know, beer keg under its neck. Different, right? And that's the problem with this is like being vague. It's like not having a concrete noun.
It's also the one thing that we always talk about in stories is when somebody just tells us how we're supposed to feel or tells us what the conclusion of something is without explaining why. Like saying, I was convinced by stories, and then just telling the story. But like, how do we, like, what convinced? Yeah, it's like, well, how we're supposed to take your word for it. Yeah. What convinced you about it? Because again, like, not everybody would read that and be like, oh yeah, that convinces me.
I agree.
Not that you're trying to convince us, more just like
we want to learn about you. I mean, that's
like
the thing.
It's like you're trying to tell us that this convinced you without telling us how it convinced you. So it's just kind of like, I mean, I don't think it's that bad because, it's not like the worst thing in the world. It's more just like, that would be one way to improve.
No, and I agree. And I think it's one of those things where, I think it is such a charged topic you're tackling that I think you probably, and it's probably one of the reasons you've written this, it sounds like a lot. You've rewritten it a lot because you want to do it justice. And I think being precise language. And that means being precise about your emotions. Because like Danielle said, it could be a completely different reaction. Like she could imagine a schnauzer. I could imagine a big, fluffy Bernese mountain dog with a beer keg around its neck. From that story, you need to guide us with your emotions. You need to bring your emotions to the forefront. That's something that I think will be a light bulb for your writing. And I would push yourself maybe on your next essay, maybe not this one, because this one you do kind of want, I think, get it to a certain place, but try to not write any facts in your next essay. No more facts. Just give me a emotional account of a day, like just only feelings and raw feelings. Maybe you don't send it to me, or maybe I don't want to know. I already get enough of that, right?
Oh my goodness, walking on the street and the birds are beautiful and they're singing. No, that would be me.
But why not? This is it's a very educational. This is a study of Chrissy's life. She initially thought this, and my.
And I think especially with this topic, like Jeff said, we're not trying to I think you're not can't convince somebody with an essay. It's more just expressing your emotions on it, and so that's kind of what. And I know I know that's what you've been trying to do, and it's I'm not saying you haven't tried that, but.
And that's the thing. Even in the most, you could say, intimate part, we don't get a real, you're talking about, I was pierced. Okay, what does that even mean? Being pierced by the humanity of a tiny shape. Okay, it was attacking you, but sorry, that's not. But that's a bad example. But for example, I felt my baby's distinctness as a unique person, separate from my body, with each progressive, stronger kick, twist, and hiccup. Now I struggled how to approach the issue with people. What does that mean? What is this nights I'd hold my, my belly and whisper, whatever. I don't know. What does that mean? This is my, precious, Gollum. I don't know. I need to have that. I need to have, because you're describing a very important fact. A feeling. I felt this. But I don't even know how you feel about that. Yes, you felt a distinct person there. What does that mean to you? I think that's going to be a hamstringing in terms of and it comes down to point of view. So many problems and so much writing comes down to point of view, which is this pulled back narrator. We need to zoom in. We need to get into your head, the moment by moment. I'm not sure. I'm still not sure if it's pro-choice or pro-life. I think maybe lack of precision and doubt is the point. I think you're right, Miak, where I think that the speaker of the essay is kind of saying hey, look, this is very complicated and these are my feelings on it. But kind of like you said, the problem is if that's going to be her approach to the work and say, hey, there are two sides to this debate. They are very fraught and painful sides. And here are my feelings about just the debate in general, not even what side I'm on. You got to bring those feelings to the front. We got to hear your feelings, and they have to be raw. They can't be summarized by a pulled back narrator, because then it just drains the life out of them. Yeah. You can't summarize your feelings. I want to play by play, my heart skipped. Zoom, take me into that ultrasound moment. What was that like? I remember that ultrasound, seeing the screen. I couldn't stop staring. My mouth fell open. My breath came in short gasps. That was my kid. Oh my gosh. I whatever it is, I want to feel something. Sorry, that's something I struggle. The reason I'm grinding an axe on this, because it's a huge problem I've had in my writing.
What have I told you in your writing?
You want to feel something.
What's the emotional story?
What's the emotional story? Yeah, that.
Well, how did they feel about this? Yeah, I tell Jeff this all the time. He's getting better, but it's tough. Almost I realized indirect. Yeah, it's digging. He's the needle being. What is the point here?
No pun intended. Yeah, the point of the needle. Boop.
Yeah.
All right. Anyways, but yeah, this is good, I think, and that's kind of beyond that. What you're describing, where this indirect style of narration that is a pullback narrator, and sometimes it's effective, and like if you've read Good Omens and Terry Pratchett, they use it brilliantly because that narrator has a very strong voice of their own. But harder if that narrator is a more of like a neutral voice. Really hard to pull that off. Now I struggled now to approach the issue with people I loved on the other side of the issue. But how would I wanted to see this as oppression. Now I struggled with the approach.
Yeah.
This issue, like, this issue mattered to me. Mattered as much as the beating in my. How do I tell someone? How can I talk to someone about this? How do you tell someone? How do you disagree when the stakes are so high? Let's go big. Or murder, or control, or hyper control. Like, yeah, let's get real. I mean, I want you to hype. This is gonna sound obnoxious, but it's such a challenge. So there's necessary to show my motivation for my writing. So I think that's the thing. Like, I want the next draft of this, Chrissy. I want to say.
He means business.
I want to say, whoa, girl, dial this down. It's crazy. Like, it's too raw. I want to say, well, this is too raw. It's too real. Because this is not too raw, nor is it too real.
I'm just picturing you laughing at this right now, Chrissy.
But like, give me like, oh man, because it's such a fraught topic, and it's like it's a very dispassionate way. It's like
I feel like you're trying to be very like PC
measured,
and like, oh, okay, I know that this is a complicated debate. I will be speaking of it as calmly and rationally as possible, but it's like you can't really, you just can't, because otherwise we're not gonna believe you either way. We're just gonna be like, I don't really know where you stand.
So they say scared writers are bland writers.
Which I think, obviously, I think
there's reason to be respectful. No, I'm not saying don't respect the other side, but like, I just like, I want to understand you. Like, I want to as a reader, I want to understand your point of view, not a series of thoughts and very distilled thoughts. And the way I understand your point of view really is to get to know how you feel about this, not how you think about this. That's how you really get understanding, is you sit with someone and you empathize with them. Empathy, not logic.
Because thoughts, I know we always joke, Chrissy, like when we share thoughts and like, oh, like I have lots of thoughts about things, but there's always feeling underneath it that kind of drives it, even when, and obviously you know that, but just good to keep in mind when writing this stuff, that you can have a lot of thoughts about things, but. Yeah.
And that's so much of what is missing, I think, is not the fact that I think, both sides have a lot of fantastic facts, and they're very well articulated facts, but it's less common to see someone just look at someone in the eye and say, like, how do you feel? Tell me what's going on.
It's like, this makes me sick to my stomach.
Or I'm terrified, or whatever it is.
I'm so scared.
Because like, I feel like that is, and that's why as a writer, you have to force people to be empathetic through candy coating. And that's why, like, they say that reading novels is so healthy for people, because it makes them sympathize with somebody else's emotions, even if they're a make-believe person. It teaches them to empathize.
And even if they're unlikable sometimes.
Yeah, because, it's one of those things. Anyways, I think, is that horse beaten?
Probably.
Yeah, okay.
You can hit it a couple more times.
A couple more. I probably will. It's like the italics. Why is that italicized?
We can just keep that on the DL for,
Yeah, for years I didn't seem necessary to approach it all. What's that? Oh, yeah, I'll keep it on the DL, yeah.
Oh, no, I mean, not too bad, but yeah. I understood their position, didn't have the words to explain mine, better not to say anything. Now I shrank from conversations through Facebook or any platform where I might have the deep convictions of my pro-choice friends transformed into vitriol of the pro-life side. Perhaps if I wrote out my thoughts, retracing my steps from one point to another, I could find the common ground, put a human face on my new perspective.
Okay. But remember, all right.
I apologize. He's a monster.
When I replayed my transition from one stance to another, I realized I hadn't completely shaken my original feeling. But the rights of the
Italics.
my original feeling. Oh my gosh, here come the italics. Let's go. Oh wow, this is it's a longer essay. All right, it's good. So maybe we won't be doing screenplays after this. It's already getting
I
late.
told you it'd take a while.
You're right. But it's good. It's like I like nonfiction because it helps me focus on prose, which is you know, in stories there's so many other issues going on, and in nonfiction the language matters a lot more. So it's a good exercise. As I replayed my transition from one stance to another. Okay, so we've forgotten the homeless debate. Okay, though here it is.
There, it's coming down later. Although
Man.
can I just say this sentence? From that sentence, I wouldn't be able to tell what side you're on. Because you can read that two ways. That the rights of a fertilized egg in another woman's when we're not on par with her rights. That could make it sound like.
Is it more on par?
No, they could make it sound like they're not on par in general, like they shouldn't be on par.
Yeah.
Or they're not on par and they should be on par.
These thoughts have been pushed aside.
Like they're technically not on par. Do you agree that they shouldn't be on par or that they should be on par?
Yeah.
So, just a heads up.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, I think Miak had a really great point. It's like some of this, like middle grounding is losing your point of view even, and I think this is another place. I think your POV might be getting lost here in the Switzerland. Unlike the developing baby, the pregnant woman was fully formed, physically and mentally complete. She is known, she is loved, she knows what it is to live, and its future that is being threatened. Why is that italicized? Oh, I know exactly. These are thoughts. Okay, that's fine. Alongside these thoughts, the memory of the woman on the street resurfaced. The woman had almost passed by the hundreds of other nameless men when I passed before her. Their physical and mental ailments don't even their dismal futures. On some level, I saw them as being less viable when I was at a distance. They were less human. Man, I still think that there needs to be a big emotional stuff in here.
It seems like there's some.
But what does it feel like? What does she think about the fact that she's ignored all these people? What's the cost? What are the emotional stakes? Maybe I will actually write that in because we haven't talked about emotional stakes. You know, what was the cost in terms of feelings of disregarding all these people? Then, you know, the material cost is, you know, the material cost is important too. But, you know, just like logic is important, feeling should also at the table. And this is like the same thing. So like in terms of the stakes, so like, you know, in terms of the goal of the story, in terms of the characters in the story, there are the facts about the characters, and then there are their characters' feelings. There are the facts about the plot, and there's what the plot makes the character feel in the experience of it. And in the same way, in the stakes, what's the risk of each perspective? And I think that's maybe what's missing a little bit in this layer, which is to say, okay, we know the material cost, we know, you know, of you ignoring the homeless, which you're comparing to, you know, ignoring the unborn. But the question I think you should be trying to push yourself on is to say, well, what was your cost of ignoring all those people? Did you ever go back and retrospect that and say, how many individuals did I just ignore? How many people, you know, that I could have been friends with, I could have helped? a sense of loss washed over me, whatever that is. Like I want to understand it. And I think that would really increase the emotional stakes of the entire story because that's kind of being used as a metaphor for what's going on in pre-life or pre-birth, whatever. I didn't stop that day. Moved by compassion. I didn't stop that day. Moved by compassion because of a still small voice.
So the reason she stopped wasn't because of compassion, but because of
Yeah, I didn't stop.
She wasn't because I was moved by compassion.
Compassion didn't stop me that day. Remember, switch up the subject and the verb, and it'll always be better. Usually. Compassion didn't stop me. Didn't, keep me from my 2 meetings that day.
A still small voice
But
did.
A still small voice. Yeah. A voice that operated on a different plane. It just doesn't around under my conclusions. I learned to listen when he did. I didn't get that sense that a still small voice stopped you in your initial anecdote.
It was an internal tug.
That was the internal tug. Remember, specificity. That was a vague description, so I was just like, oh, she's feeling kind of guilty.
See, there we go. See, now that's good for you to not be aware that that's kind of the way you want to describe it.
Yeah. Something which I felt an internal tug. Is this the still small voice described later? Or something else?
The hint from God. God talking to you.
Can make this more clear.
It's helpful. You answered that for us. Okay.
Am I being too harsh?
No. Okay. Am I being too harsh?
Yes. You sick son of a gun.
I just passionate and
no, I'm passionate too.
Help out.
I get carried away. I hope you forgive my italics. I'm just kidding. Or whatever it is.
And I actually really like the point that stopping was contrary or ran counter to
logic.
I think that would be important to bring. Like that would be something important to bring into that internal tug moment at the beginning.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't like your natural. Yeah. I would definitely. Because I feel like that's like key, right?
That's the core of this essay. Can it be more, hinted and set up? I think to Danielle's point, this is a fantastic point of view. It's very well phrased. It seems to be the heart of what you're trying to get at with your essay. Unfortunately, this is the first time that idea has come up in a clear and understandable way. So, and it's not like, oh, that's what she's been building to the whole time. It feels like it's like, oh, this is another great idea in a list of ideas. It's probably, and just because I've read a few of your nonfiction works before, because you've submitted to Final Boss, woo-woo.
Also, we did tell you to just write stuff and then we would edit it, so no shame for just writing thoughts.
That's true. It wasn't off that film. Well, there's much shame. I'm just kidding. No shame. Doing it directly, but I learned to listen when he did. According to my reasoning, stopping made no sense. Past so many men's and women's like that. I want to see this in scene. Why is this here? Why isn't this playing out moment by moment in the beginning so I can feel it? I don't like. It's great to know the logic of that moment. I want to because that's how I change. I am forced into empathy. I am forced to feel what you felt that day and then connect in a different way to reality than I did before through empathy. So I think that I would really like this might be better played out, showing / not telling in the intro. Make me feel this in the beginning. Then later on explain that feeling here.
Yeah. Like I think you could I really like that. I didn't want to be face to face with her pain. I think that that's something you could introduce early.
Where was that line? That's a great line.
Yeah.
Oh wow. I didn't see that.
No, like I said, that's great, and that could be something that you introduce early on, and we're kind of like, oh, like what does that mean?
Yeah, that needs to be a paragraph break. That's a killer line, and it's buried.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you can build up to the explanation.
Yeah, like, that's a great line.
Yeah.
And that's an emotional line.
Yeah, it's great.
That's you're being afraid. That's exactly what we need everywhere.
That's what we want.
Yes.
Even in my close relationships, pain terrified me. See, this is great. This is the good stuff. Yeah. I felt powerless, overwhelmed when a friend came to me with heartbreak or financial fears.
Again, I would still want show notes. So you're in the realm of emotions.
Yeah, it's closer.
But now we need to show those emotions, not just tell them. So you're doing great in the realm of emotion. But I need to be shown, not told them. Describe your mental state and stream of conscious thoughts to evoke the feeling.
Your caps lock's out of control.
I'm trying to get the keywords. Well, so
should I italicize them?
I should italicize. I should have used italics. You're right.
Just kidding.
Yeah, that's true. I'm trying to think of a good example. The best example is poetry. In terms of poetry is image evoking of emotion. Stream of consciousness is how you, I think, would want to do it. It's very complicated. Let me see if I can find Ms. Dalloway. Find an example for you. Because that's like kind of the quintessential. Fox is like, Jeff. I'll read one of my friend's books.
Cool.
So this is the poem called Unremember. It's about one of my classmates wrote this book. You guys should all buy it. Mother Tongue Apologize.
What's your point here? What are you trying to do?
This is how a poet is evoking emotion through... Because the problem is, at least in my experience in writing, is that when you write a feeling and then someone tells you to show and don't tell it, it's really hard. It's the hardest thing to show feeling. Because we don't show it on the outside. You have to kind of do it through language, and it's very complicated. It's one of the hardest and most difficult things. I still don't have it down by any means. It's one of the hardest and most difficult things to pull off in writing, is to describe something in a way that makes someone feel powerless and overwhelmed without having to say, I felt powerless and overwhelmed. Really hard to do. And this is a poem about this lady's loss, about when her mother died. It's called Unremember. I'll just read the whole thing because it's really great. One way of bringing you back is to observe your garland frame as art, dying, obsolete, unappreciated between origami and handmade candles. Another is to bring back the heart of imitation leather from hospital guest beds. The heat of imitation, I can't read. From hospital guest beds. Who knew waiting rooms were carriers of sweaty fevers, making it impossible to deceive dream from memory? What can I have said to raise you from the dead? What do volumes of elegies contain that I don't? So that's like, it's giving the absence that the speaker is feeling. That's a rhetorical question. It's very powerful. What do volumes of elegies contain that I don't? Their own inabilities to say the unsaid to the one who will unsee, unhear, untouch, unmove, ununderstand. Understand, I'm trying to backpack through geography of a future without you, my compass. And no one has written a Lonely Planet guide titled 100 Getaways Without Mother. Or let's produce a reality TV show for contestants to adventure through losses on a shoestring budget. Today you are not allowed to take the deceased's name. Today you are not to remember the way she smiled when she said yours. You cannot hold faith as a torchlight over reality's head. You'll be disqualified if you re-enter the symmetry of this world with longing as your wild card. For your last challenge, you must dump the vanishing remains into a glass exhibit and create an evening of everything that is. Label it was.
Tear up.
It's good. That's the thing, because made me feel things. Like it's, and that's the power of language.
Poetry is beautiful.
Yeah, and she's one of my classmates. Woo woo. USF. She's awesome.
Which one was she?
Preeti. I don't know if you met her. She's Actually, you did. You saw her at the.
I was gonna say I saw your.
At the presentation.
Yeah.
She was the Indian girl.
What is she? What was hers about?
Probably from this collection.
Come and read it.
Yeah, it's good. The other ones are a little more. It changes topics.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good. That one was it's a really good poem. That's where I stopped. I was gonna finish it. I'm about halfway through. But yeah, man, what a great poem, and that's the, that's the power of language. Is she's not saying I felt this horrible loss. She's making us feel it. And that, is in many ways, that's a different type of what you're doing. You're writing something about your life, a personal essay, and she's doing the same thing, but through poetry. She's more feelings oriented. So in prose, you're going to be using other devices. She's using imagery. She's using rhetoric. You have even more at your disposal. You have stream of consciousness, raw thought. Use those devices. I think what you want to look at, Chrissy, from the next round of edits is take some time and read and see and really take a bunch of notes. Yeah.
This one's good too. This one's called Relationships. Sorry, I'm just going to read it because I like it. And it's kind of about the mom again. Humor has a thing for dark spaces. Else how can you explain me kissing my boyfriend hard as the flight blackened for takeoff? The flight I was taking to go see my sick mother. I'd find out on landing that she passed away when my tongue was busy sampling lust. I reached home and gargled my mouth with all my lungs as if guilt could be rinsed and emptied into a sink. What else is space but a body of dark humor tied to physical affection like artificial life support? How else can I explain why I overloved every boyfriend after her with a fondness reserved only for mothers? I like that about her trying to gargle her mouth to get rid of the guilt. I like that a lot.
Yeah, those concrete details. Yeah, you should read it.
It's good.
Great. She was one of the.
I was like, oh, I like this.
She's one of the people in class when she would give you notes on something, you'd be like, okay, yeah, I'll listen.
You were right.
Yeah, you're probably right. Anyways, when a friend came to me with heartbreak or financial fears, or any time a loved one's problems were outside the scope of my abilities to fix, for years, this was one of the primary reasons I didn't want children. Bringing a new life into the world, even under ideal circumstances, meant suffering helplessly alongside him or her through the pain life would inevitably present. Woo woo, I'm right behind you there. I haven't gotten past it yet, but I like these. So these are great ideas, but they're not having the buildup, and that's the challenge, right? I feel like you have such great insights, but they are just there among other less good ideas. So my suggestion would be take out all the fluff ideas and all the fluff thoughts. Stick with these great insights and then just build your story around them. This is a killer insight. But there are so many, okay ideas or ideas we've heard before that this doesn't stand out like it deserves to. Pick, 3 killer ideas and build the story and and instruct and lay them out in a way that has a narrative arc. Pick 3 killer ideas,
I think there's even, not to jump in, I feel like there's overlap for some of your ideas when you're talking about bringing a new life into the world and suffering. You're beginning of the story is you walking down the street and seeing this suffering. I think that there's a place for you to tie those together.
Yeah.
Like being afraid of, like overwhelmed by pain, just in general.
Yeah. My thought here is you might just want to write down all your what are all the ideas? Just get a big ass piece of paper. And I literally do this for my own writing. I have a big old book that's just white paper, and I got it off Amazon for $20, really cheap. I can send you the link. And then just write down all the ideas there, and then start crossing out the less effective ones, putting symbols by the ones that are pretty similar, and combine them and find the two, because an essay can really only hold 1 to 3 ideas max, and you have to, everything else is building up to it. So we have ideas about this, very stirring story of this mother. We have the ideas of your reasoning. We have the ideas of, we have the ideas behind the transition. We've had your journey from one place to another. We've had your ideas of a conflicted relationship with friends. You have to just write all those down and circle the 3 that are going to make it in here, and make sure they're the good ones, like this, and build it around that, because there is so many ideas, but you need to support them with substance, and that's where the rest of it comes. They need substance. They need to be embodied, and by putting life and emotion into them, you just don't have room to do. I'm realizing now that the reason there's no emotion is you just don't have room. There's just so much stuff packed in here that is not driving towards a single goal. There's different goals operating, and that's the reason it's getting so fractured, I think, perhaps. There are so many ideas, and they all, some are pointing, I know. Going fast. So we're going to speed up here because it's getting late.
Oh, we'll skip, okay.
Yeah.
How far does it make sense to me from this perspective?
Yeah, even close relationships terrified me. There are already too many people in need of care, too few willing to provide it. Ending a life before it truly began was more humane than bringing a baby into an environment that wasn't ready for it. Another great idea. But which is your point? Only on one point I realized that in avoiding anything that might put me closer in contact, I was cutting off a part of myself. The emotional side? Hey-oh, I'm just kidding. Was that bad? Is that bad?
We get it.
Okay. I'm sorry. I think this is really good, and the reason that we're getting passionate is there's a lot of good material here, and there's some really great stuff here, and it's like one of those things when you read a book about a character you like, and that character you like does something that frustrates you. You're like, why did the character do this? Because we care about the character in the first place, that we're bothered, So,
Yeah. Okay.
At some point, I realized that avoiding anything might put me closer to okay. Then it was then when I started seeing a God, listening to logic so different from my own. Didn't have to fix the pain around me, so I just had to be willing to enter into it. Helping others wasn't the neutral transfer I'd previously thought. Is that supposed to be like that? Where I lost proportion of to what recipient gained. God added grace to the equation, multiplying the effect in both directions. Another great idea. This whole thing, but again, this feels like just general. It's less, it's like it's about abortion, but it's pulling me in another direction. This is great, a core idea, but it feels at odds with the softer arguments. I mean, I honestly don't think this is the more compelling question. Yeah. This stuff up here just feels like fluff in comparison.
Yeah.
This is way less interesting to me than your actual thoughts, because this is somebody else's experience and thoughts. These are actually your experience and thoughts. This is a level above that, I feel like.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
I'm gonna say, this. These, paragraphs feel far less compelling than the stuff you explore later. This is, these are arguments I've heard. and they're delivered similarly. But the later stuff seems to be a fresher point of view. Yeah, because like this feels really fresh. Yeah, this is the fresh POV part. Just FYI. Looking back at this moment, a new thought dawned on me. I might only feel the humanity of those I cannot see, or choose not to get close enough to truly see, was a limitation of my own perception. The former agnostic in me wanted to leave God out of the story, to outline my position in purely humanitarian terms, but I realized that apart from God, apart from my belief that He works through and infuses grace in even the most difficult situations, I might not conclude that all lives were worth defending. With this belief, I can't conclude otherwise. I know women who gave birth before they were ready, others who carried babies with severe deformities to term. I've seen them walk with God through their pain, and emerge with others
on the other end.
On the other end, and emerge maybe just like that, with hearts repaired and expanded in almost supernatural ability. Okay, now I want you here. I want, we've gotten a lot of them stories. I want your story along with these, or at least how these stories affected you. See, can't spell. So I maintain the conclusion that all lives are worth defending, not just for their own sake, but for ours. That we are called to be part of God's great equation, to kneel down next to the woman who isn't ready to be a mother, care for and learn from the child who survived against the odds. Because I trust that God has the interests of all of humanity closer to heart than I ever could. I trust God because that still small counterintuitive voice suddenly has yet to lead me astray.
See, that's good. Okay, so it sounds like that should be
this is the principal idea. Yeah. I think the principal idea feels like, God's logic, God's logic versus my logic.
And
so then
guiding
and
his guidance.
Yeah, his guidance. So like to some degree that feels like it would be structured like, my logic. The first time, maybe like the first time logics differed. My logic about abortion. What would God's logic be? And the synthesis of of trust, trust in his guidance.
Yeah, I think that it comes together more at the end, for sure.
I feel like all the new, because I think I read an older draft of this, and none of this stuff was there, and I feel like the vestiges of the last draft are just that, vestiges of the last draft, and as painful as it is, you might want to consider cutting them. The new material is much stronger, so overall. This is a structure, and then I'll say, the new material is much stronger. The older material, consider just getting rid of that and following the new perspective. The newer stuff. Bring in emotion and read to see how other writers of prose and other forms make it happen. Great work. Really interesting. Any other thoughts? Great job. Any other thoughts? Any overall takeaways? Yeah, just simplify and cut out ideas that aren't
an outline.
Yeah, outline. That aren't the big 1 to 3. Just try a draft. Try a
See
draft.
how many you can make
With
connect.
only 3 ideas. Do a word map. Map of all your ideas and see how you can connect them. Yep, that would be my thoughts. Great work.
Agreed. Well done.
Great work. And we will see you very soon in wherever.
Yeah.
Take care. Have a good one. Can't wait to see the next draft. And best of luck. Now, the evening is done.
It is indeed.
The night is done.
After 1 a.m., Fox turns into a pumpkin.
She's a pumpkin. Later.